Hello, Westside. It's great to see you. I'm really glad you're here. You know, during the COVID era, this is like a full room. I mean, you guys you're socially distanced appropriately and all of that, but it's about the fullest room I've seen for a while, so it's great to have you here. And it's also great to have those of you who are joining us online today. Thanks so much for worshiping with us today, and thanks to our worship team for leading us today. Drew Dudley put on the silliest hat he owned. He filled a bucket with lollipops, and he began working the crowd of freshman students who were registering for the very first day of classes at a little college in eastern Canada. Drew was recruiting students to be involved in the cystic fibrosis charity that he loved so much, so he decided to catch the freshmen during their first hours on campus to try to draw them into the charity. He approached the shy-looking freshman boy who happened to be in line behind an attractive freshman girl, and he offered the young man a lollipop, and then he put him on the spot by saying, "You need to give that lollipop to the beautiful young woman next to you." The young man instantly turned red with embarrassment, but he took the lollipop, and without turning in the girl's direction or looking her in the eye, he held it out for the young woman to take. Almost 4 years later, when that young woman was about to graduate from college, she found Drew and said, "I don't know if you remember, but you approached the guy standing next to me in line at freshman orientation a few years ago, and you were wearing the stupidest hat I've ever seen, and you pressured that guy to give me a lollipop." She went on to say, "What you could not have known is that I had told my parents the night before in the hotel that I wanted to go home. I didn't want to stay at college. And they said they would take me home, but they asked me if I would go and register for classes the next day just to see if I would change my mind during the registration process. And at registration, I was about to tell them that I was ready to get out of line and head for home when you approached the guy next to me and told him to give me a lollipop. And after he did that, you looked at my parents and you joked, 'Didn't you teach her not to take candy from strangers?'" She went on, "Everyone standing near us burst into laughter, and so did I, and that's the moment I decided to stay at college. That's when I began believing that everything would work out well for me here." Drew thanked her for recounting the story, but he admitted that he could not recall the incident. The young woman said, "Well, that's not the whole story. 4 years later, I'm still dating the guy who was next to me in line." And Drew smiled about that. And he smiled again a year or so later when he received an invitation to their wedding. The point of Drew's story is that influence, leadership, is not a position, it's not a place of privilege. Leadership is using our opportunities and using our influence to benefit other people. Leading is serving, it's inspiring other people. We don't need a corner office or a big title in order to do that. We can help and we can guide other people, even with a silly hat on and a bucket full of lollipops, if we possess the right spirit and if we have the right motive. Now, some of you are newer to Westside, and you've actually come our way during the pandemic. We've actually had people who've been added to our church during the pandemic. And if that's you, maybe I can offer you a shortcut today on understanding us. One of the distinctive things about Westside is that we believe in leadership. We see in the scriptures that God equips people in a variety of ways. And one of the spiritual gifts that God can give to people is leadership. The healthiest churches are biblical communities where people who are gifted to lead are allowed to lead and welcome to lead. Now, some churches spin their wheels and they never get traction because no one in the church trusts anyone else in the church to provide leadership for the church. And that's a shame, because a healthy, well-led church blesses people who are a part of it, and it blesses people that it touches in the city, in the community. But as much as we believe in the advantages of leadership, we acknowledge the potential pitfalls of leadership also. If a person possesses the authority to do what is good as a leader, then a person possesses the authority to do bad things as a leader. And few things are more destructive than when someone misuses authority. So this is the reason that we bring leaders together at Westside on a regular basis. Now, we meet to make plans, of course, but we also meet to remind each other of the spirit in which we are to lead. Our ministry directors meet weekly. Our entire staff meets at least monthly. Staff teams and departments meet as often as 2 or 3 times a week. We hold training events for volunteer leaders. We periodically host growth opportunities for every leader in our church, paid and unpaid. So this is a place where leaders gather often to sharpen our skills and to renew our perspective about what we're doing. But today I want to do something a little unusual. I want to speak to our leaders in the presence of our entire church. And I want to do that for a couple of reasons. First, because our entire church needs to know the difference between healthy and unhealthy leadership. We've all seen churches where over time people become accustomed to the dysfunction and they begin to think that it's normal. And the result is usually weaker churches and disillusioned believers. So it's important that we expect those who lead us to remain humble and to be healthy. But secondly, I want each of us to recognize that God has given us influence and given us rapport in some setting, and the reason He's done that is not to stroke our egos or to set us above other people. The reason is so that we can benefit and bless other people with our influence. I love the scene in the movie Lincoln, in which the president cannot convince his cabinet that the 2 additional votes needed to pass the 13th Amendment are possible to get. And when the cabinet members tell Lincoln, 1 time too many, it can't be done, the normally soft-spoken Lincoln slams his hand on the table. And he reminds them that his role gives him immense power and that he is determined to use it to change the future, not just for the millions who were enslaved at the time, but for the millions yet to come. And his advisors insist the time is not right. This doesn't have to be done now. But Lincoln points around the table and shouts, "Now, now, now." Lincoln understood his authority was given to him to be used, to be leveraged for good. So today, I want us to explore Matthew chapter 23. Where Jesus pronounced a scathing rebuke of the spiritual leaders of his day because they had turned leadership into everything that it was meant not to be. And they had done it in God's name. Rather than helping people, they were harming people. Rather than inspiring people, they were breaking people's spirits. And Jesus' words to them are a reminder that leadership is a sacred trust that has to be stewarded. And while Jesus directs his words to religious leaders, they also apply to all of us who lead in any realm. They apply on some level to every parent, supervisor, employee, politician, coach, teacher, every board member, every staff member and volunteer at a church. Why? Because the greatest attribute a leader can possess, the greatest of all time, is a spirit of servanthood. This is what we should expect of our leaders. This is how we should try to lead. And this is what we have to expect from ourselves. I want you to look at what Jesus says first in Matthew 23, verse 1. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees are the official interpreters of the law of Moses. So, practice and obey whatever they tell you, but don't follow their example. For they don't practice what they teach. They crush people with unbearable religious demands, and they never lift a finger to ease the burden." Maybe you remember, but the Bible describes Jesus as both a lion and a lamb. Can you think of two creatures that are any more different in nature than a lion and a lamb? And yet Jesus is portrayed as both. We celebrated Jesus as the lamb a few minutes ago as we took communion. Because as a sheep goes quietly to the slaughter, Jesus went willingly to the cross to pay for our sins. As John the Baptist said it, he is the lamb that takes away the sins of the world. But when Jesus returns, the Bible says he'll come as a lion, judging the people of every nation, exercising authority over every government, every person. And this is the Jesus that is forgotten by so many people today. In the book of Revelation, chapter 1, Jesus does not seem very lamb-like when he returns. He is described like a warrior in a video game, and he is, as my friends and I used to say it, kicking butt and taking names. I love the grace and the forgiveness and the gentleness of Jesus, and that is the primary way that we portray him to the world, but it is good for us to remember that the lamb is also a lion. Well, in Matthew 23, Jesus speaks more like a lion than a lamb. He's a bit like a staff member who worked with me at another church years ago. Everyone loved this guy because he was so meek and humble. He had a pastor's heart. He tolerated a lot of immaturity and just led people along gently. But one night, he attended a meeting with some divisive, mean people, and he reached his limit. He looked some of those divisive, petulant people in the eye, and he called them out for their dishonesty and their selfishness. And because he was known as such a lamb-like personality, it surprised the people who witnessed it. But I thought it was a lot like Jesus. Part lamb, part lion. 2 chapters before the chapter we're looking at today, we're in Matthew 23. 2 chapters earlier in Matthew 21, Jesus visits the temple and he sees that the leaders, the religious leaders, have turned the temple into a scam, a money-making enterprise. And he made it clear he was not happy about that. So in the next chapter, chapter 22 of Matthew, one chapter before the one we're looking at today, the religious leaders attempt to retaliate. They want to discredit Jesus. And so they seek revenge by trying to engage Jesus in controversial debates. Their attempt to embarrass Jesus turns out a little like Uncle Drew basketball videos. Have you seen the Uncle Drew basketball videos? Most of you probably have. Some of you saw the movie that followed. NBA All-Star Kyrie Irving is disguised as an old man by professional makeup artists. And so he makes his way into a game at a random playground, and he proceeds to, well, at first he shoots an air ball, then he hits only the backboard, and he warms up, and then he dominates the game. Well, that's how it goes when you try to take Jesus to the mat in a theological debate. It does not work out well for you because he schools you. He makes you look foolish and presumptuous. The religious experts wanted to discredit Jesus by posing difficult questions about tax-paying scenarios and divorce and remarriage, about messianic prophecies, the toughest topics they could devise. But instead of being perplexed by what they asked, Jesus made them look foolish for the way they asked it. So in Matthew chapter 23, Jesus had had enough of them. And so he welcomes this confrontation with the religious leaders because he wants to expose them, and this is how he does it. In most translations, this chapter has a little title at the beginning that reads, The Seven Woes, because 7 times at least in this chapter, Jesus speaks directly to and about the scribes and the Pharisees, the religious leaders, and he says, woe to you. Woe to you. We don't use that word a lot. You know, when we think someone is in trouble, we don't say, hey, dude, woe to you. But a woe is a prediction of bad things coming. It is a pronouncement of consequences or judgment. One version of the Bible translates Jesus' words, woe to you, as you're hopeless. You're in trouble. You've asked for it, and now you're going to get it. And the Pharisees had brought God's judgment on themselves in a number of ways. But in these 7 woes, there are really at least 3 main categories of offense that Jesus said they had committed. The first was hypocritical teaching. Now, when we discover hypocrisy in a teacher, we sometimes claim that the person's hypocrisy undermines what the person taught. We say things like, why should I obey that instruction when the teacher does not obey that instruction? But Jesus didn't say that. Jesus said hypocrisy invalidates the messenger, not the message. Jesus did not condemn the core truths that the Pharisees taught. He condemned their failure to obey the spirit of those commands and then all the unnecessary commands they stacked on top of God's commands. Look at verse 3 again. So practice and obey whatever they tell you, but don't follow their example, for they don't practice what they teach. Maybe you've heard before that this word Jesus used here, hypocrisy, in the Greek, the original language, it's actually a theater term. It's a reference to the masks that actors would use to portray multiple characters. The Wikipedia explanation of hypocrisy reads, hypocrisy is the contrivance of a false appearance of virtue or goodness while concealing the real character traits or inclinations. Have you ever done that? Have you ever contrived an appearance because you really wanted people to think better of you than what you deserved? I've done that. Years ago, when my daughter was 10 or 11, she did something at church on a Sunday morning like this, of which I did not approve. I don't recall what it was, but on that day, it seemed like a bigger deal than it probably was. So as I pulled into the driveway at home, I decided I was not going to take the tender approach on that occasion. I was going to lower the boom dad style. So I walked in the house and I put my things down and I started up the stairs and I put a little extra force in each step because a dad knows how to walk like that. And I called my daughter's name. And when I didn't hear an answer, I shouted her name, like yelled her name, I think she would say. And her bedroom door was partially open, so I began my speech as I was approaching her door, full volume, pushed the door open to continue, which is when I saw my daughter's friend whom she had brought home with her for the afternoon from church. And for a moment, we all had the same uh-oh expression on our faces. But we had it for different reasons. Christina, because her dad was raising his voice. Her friend, because her preacher was raising his voice. And me, because I was caught red-handed raising my voice. So guess what I did? I apologized quickly for shouting, but I also underwent a miraculous personality transformation. I grabbed another mask, and my volume dropped, and my tone changed, and it was something like this. Christina, what do you think you would like for lunch, dear? Before I left the room, I joked with my daughter's friend and got a chuckle out of her so that I would seem more charming than I really am. I changed masks. And Jesus said hypocrites become adept at mask switching. In fact, we can become so good at putting the right mask on at what we think is the right time that we actually forget who is the real us and who is just a portrayal. The second offense that Jesus confronted in the religious leaders was their oppressive expectations. Over time, unhealthy leaders raise expectations on other people while lowering expectations on themselves. And at some point, it becomes an unfair burden. It becomes a form of abuse. In verse 4 of Matthew 23, Jesus describes it like this. They crush people with unbearable religious demands, and they never lift a finger to ease the burden. The religious leaders of Jesus' day invented new rules that had to be followed, new hoops through which people had to jump. If you've ever worked in a place that constantly announces new policies, new guidelines, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you remember the Harry Potter movie or the book in which a new headmaster comes to Hogwarts school and all of a sudden more and more rules are posted on the wall, the rules just become oppressive. That's the kind of leadership that Jesus is describing. Unhealthy leaders devise rules for other people that they refuse to apply to themselves. The third category of things that Jesus disliked about the spiritual leaders in his day goes to the very heart of this series and the title of this series, because they had a warped view of what greatness is. Now, what did Jesus mean by that? He meant they were obsessed with looking good. They were obsessed with looking the part. They pursued lofty titles more than they pursued humble obedience. I'm not answering a text message. I actually want to read this passage from the Bible on my phone. Let me read verses 5 through 12. Jesus says, everything they do is for show. On their arms, they wear extra wide boxes with scripture verses inside, and they wear robes with extra long tassels. And they love to sit at the head table at banquets and in the seats of honor in the synagogues. They love to receive respectful greetings as they walk in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi. Well, don't let anyone call you rabbi, for you only have one teacher. And all of you are equal as brothers and sisters. That was such a novel concept in the religious environment of Jesus' day because of the religious leaders. And don't address anyone here on earth as Father, for only God in heaven is your Father. And don't let anyone call you teacher, for you have only one teacher, the Messiah. The greatest among you must be a servant. But those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Spiritual responsibility, spiritual leadership has to be conveyed or communicated in some way. So it normally comes with some kind of title. And it normally comes with some kind of visibility, because people step on platforms like this one and do the kinds of things that you've seen us do today. But there's a temptation for leaders to bask in our titles and in our visibility, to relish being seen and being known, to enjoy moments that make us look important. This passage and these words by Jesus, they're the reason that I'm glad our church does not expect me to wear some kind of distinctive clothing that announces to people that I'm a minister of the gospel, man of the cloth. I really wouldn't like that. Dressing normally allows other people to be able to identify with me. Plus, I'm not as easy to recognize when I drive aggressively around Springfield. The fake beard helps with that too. And when I'm really, really in a hurry, I use a magnetic license plate that says Pastor Jeff and put a Cherry Hill sticker on my window. I'll probably get a text from him later today. Seriously, friend, nothing is as difficult to detect in ourselves as self-righteousness. Spiritual pretense is insidious because it can hide in spiritual words and in spiritual environments. And it often begins with wanting to do something that is right. But somewhere along the line, we hijack that thing or those words and we try to use it to elevate ourselves. And when our motives become tainted and we seek to elevate ourselves, we can become more corrupt in our motives than we ever imagined. Let me close with a question that all of us have to ask. It's a question about motive. And it's a question that only the Holy Spirit can help you or me answer honestly. Here's the question. Why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? Why am I making a point of being seen or being heard? The key to spiritual authenticity is knowing why I speak the words I do, why I lead the way I do. It's knowing why I aspire to a bigger role, why I want to be visible, why I want to look the way I look. When I'm spiritually mature, I'll know why it bothers me not to be asked to do something. I'll know why I really crave that friendship with that person, why I speak up, why I adopt a cause, why I dislike that person, why I want so much to impress that person. And this question is important because of what Jesus said in verse 5 of Matthew 23. His indictment of the religious leaders, remember the words? Everything they do is for show. Let's say that sentence together. Everything they do is for show. It is not just they who do it. Jesus didn't say some of what they do is for show. Most of what they do is showy. He said they've reached the place where everything they do is a performance. They really don't know anymore when it's the real self speaking or when they have the mask on. And that's a dangerous place to be. You know, the biggest problem with right behavior is that it can be done for the wrong reasons. Isn't that crazy? You can do just the right thing, but ruin it with the wrong motive. It's possible to attend worship for the right reasons, and I hope you're here for those reasons. But it's also possible to do it because we want to be seen. It's possible to teach or to lead so that others will see us doing it. It's possible to volunteer so that others know we have. It's possible to do kind, generous things for applause. And it's certainly possible to post about all these things on social media so that someone will see what we believe or what we have done and comment. And here's the tricky thing. I don't know where the line between what we do to set an example and what we do to perform for other people, I don't really know exactly where it is. Because Jesus said, let your good deeds be seen by people so that God can be glorified. Jesus also said, don't do your righteous acts to be seen by people. So it sounds like contradictory instruction. It's really not. Jesus is saying, do good things, but make sure you ask the question, why am I doing this? And don't allow your motive to go dark.